3 people have been killed by a man wielding a knife at a church in the French city of Nice. President Macron has described the incident as an Islamist terror attack. The attacker reportedly tried to behead one of the victims. Police have named the suspect as Ibrahim Al-Sawi, a 21-year-old Tunisian who reportedly crossed the Mediterranean onto the Italian island of Lampedusa only last month. President Emmanuel Macron appealed for unity and said thousands of troops will be deployed to protect churches and schools. France has raised its national security alert to its highest level. And as Europe's COVID-19 crisis intensifies, France is restoring a national lockdown to curb transmissions of the virus. New restrictions have been announced in Sweden and in Germany, where Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned of a long, hard winter ahead.
President Trump won Wisconsin by less than 1 percentage point in 2016. That was a year when nearly 1.5 million eligible voters in the state didn't vote.
Do you remember how many votes President Trump won Wisconsin by?
22,748.
Can one organization's efforts to increase voter turnout make a difference in 2020?
In Nice, France, a man armed with a knife killed 3 people at a Christian religious center. Officials call the killings a terror attack. China charges 19-year-old Hong Kong democracy activist Tony Chung with secession. He is the first person to face charges under the new national security law for Hong Kong. Algeria's president was transported from a hospital in Algiers to Germany after the coronavirus spread among his assistants. And in the United States, at least 2 people are dead and many without electricity after Hurricane Zeta hit the Louisiana coast.
We begin this hour in France, where 1 woman was beheaded and 2 others were killed in a knife attack in the southern city of Nice. The killings happened Thursday morning at the Notre Dame Basilica. The assailant was reportedly shot by police and is now in custody. The city's mayor says the suspect repeatedly shouted Allahu Akbar, meaning God is great in Arabic, while being treated at the scene. National anti-terror prosecutors say they've opened an investigation. The bloodshed comes less than 2 weeks after a junior high school teacher was beheaded in a Paris suburb. Prosecutors say it may be linked to a lesson by the teacher. He showed students a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad when lecturing about freedom of expression. Hours after the Nice attack, Prime Minister Jean Castex said the government has raised the security alert for the French territory to the highest level. He said the government's response would be firm and determined. The U.S. economy made its biggest jump on record between July and September. It rebounded from a massive contraction the previous quarter caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Commerce Department officials on Thursday said the country's GDP expanded at an annualized rate of 33.1%. That's the fastest growth since data keeping began in 1947. The performance of the economy in the April-June period was dire. It plunged by 31.4%, the worst drop ever. That magnified the size of the bounce in Q3. Personal spending accounts for about 70% of U.S. GDP. It grew by about 40.7%. Business investment and exports also increased dramatically. But a nationwide resurgence of the coronavirus pandemic is already tainting the positive result. Experts say the sharp rise in infections is clouding the U.S. economic outlook. Turning to Japan with the latest on the coronavirus, more than 800 new cases have been confirmed on Thursday. According to NHK, that brings the total number of infections from across the country to more than 100,000. The milestone comes as officials caution there may be a possible shortage of hospital beds for COVID-19 patients. The Health Ministry released data on Wednesday showing that Tokyo and the prefectures of Aomori, Fukushima, and Okinawa hit stage 3 on hospital bed availability. That's the second most serious stage. It means that major problems could arise in the medical system. The numbers were current as of October 20th. Officials in Fukushima said later they had enough beds as of Tuesday. In another troubling sign, the positivity rate for PCR tests in Aomori hit 10.7% for the week through October 18th.
The situation is different, prefecture to prefecture.
but it appears the number of new cases is steadily increasing in some areas, so we have to be on our toes.
The pandemic is also affecting Myanmar's general election. Citizens aged 60 and over can vote early to reduce the risk of infection. One who did so is the country's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's 75. Aung San Suu Kyi went Thursday to a polling station in the capital, Naypyidaw. She's registered as a resident of Yangon, but she may not be able to go there on election day because people's movements are being restricted to contain the coronavirus. Election day is November 8th. Myanmar has seen a sharp rise in coronavirus infections since mid-August. More than 1,000 new cases have been reported almost every day this month. More than 20 opposition and newly formed parties want the election postponed. The government says it'll be held as planned. The focus in the election is on whether the National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, can keep its majority in parliament. Its victory in the previous election in 2015 brought an end to decades of military-led rule. The government has come under international criticism for its treatment of the country's Muslim Rohingya minority. In South Korea, the Supreme Court has upheld a 17-year prison sentence for a former president convicted of a series of charges, including bribery. On Thursday, the court dismissed an appeal from former President Lee Myung-bak, who continues to maintain his innocence. It also rejected prosecutors' appeals for a harsher sentence. Lee was president from 2008 to 2013. He was accused of granting a pardon to the chairman of Samsung Electronics in return for the firm paying lawsuit expenses for an auto parts company he effectively owns. In February, a lower court handed down a 17-year sentence and ordered Lee to pay nearly $16 million. He's been out on bail since February, but is expected to return to prison soon. Diplomats from Japan and South Korea are keeping up their talks on wartime labor issues that have strained relations for years. Takizaki Shigeki is Director General of the Japanese Foreign Ministry's Asian and Oceanian Affairs Bureau. He met in Seoul with his South Korean counterpart, Kim Jong-han. The issue that brought them together stems from a set of rulings by South Korea's Supreme Court 2 years ago. It ordered 2 Japanese companies to compensate South Koreans who say the firms forced them to work during World War II. But Japan maintains the right to claim compensation was brought to an end by an agreement in 1965. Earlier this year, a lower court moved forward with procedures that could lead to the sale of assets seized from one of the firms, Nippon Steel. Takizaki said liquidating the assets could seriously damage relations and must be avoided at all costs. He reiterated Japan's request for South Korea to present a mutually acceptable solution. They agreed their governments will keep communicating. Earlier in the day, though, a South Korean court took a step toward selling assets seized from another Japanese firm, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. The plaintiffs said the court had published documents related to the sale on its website. And they say Mitsubishi Heavy will be deemed to have received the documents on November 10th. But local media say the process of liquidating the assets will take more time because further steps are needed. Survivors of the 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are renewing calls for people to sign an anti-nuclear petition. They're pushing the Japanese government to ratify a UN treaty banning nuclear weapons. The survivors held a rally in Tokyo on Thursday. Tanaka Terumi, who represents the group of survivors, called for expanding the campaign to make the government change its nuclear policy.
Japan is the only country to have suffered atomic bombings in war. The government must spearhead efforts to abolish nuclear weapons.
The UN treaty has been ratified by the minimum 50 member states needed to come into force. It'll go into effect next January. But the 5 major nuclear powers, as well as countries such as Japan that fall under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, have not joined the treaty. The survivors plan to collect signatures nationwide and via an online petition. Japan's two biggest car makers had an unusually busy September. Toyota and Honda recorded their highest ever output for the month, driven by stronger demand in China and the U.S. Toyota says it produced more than 840,000 vehicles. That's up nearly 12% from last September. It was the firm's first year-on-year increase in 9 months. Honda manufactured more than 470,000 units, an increase of almost 10%. It was the company's first year-on-year rise in 14 months. Both automakers ramped up production in their Chinese and U.S. factories to meet demand spurred by economic reopenings in those countries. Their production levels in Japan were also higher than a year before. A leading Taiwanese semiconductor maker has pleaded guilty to the theft of trade secrets from U.S. chip maker Micron Technology. United Microelectronics Corporation, or UMC, has agreed to pay a $60 million fine. The U.S. Department of Justice indicted UMC in 2018. It was accused of stealing information on DRAM chips from Micron. A Chinese state-owned company, Fujian Jinhua Integrated Circuit, was indicted on the same charges at the time. That company had an agreement with UMC to help develop its chip manufacturing. The stolen trade secrets are estimated to be worth up to $8.7 billion. UMC says it's admitted to infringement of some of the trade secrets. The Justice Department says the fine is the second highest for a case of this kind. It says the fine's payment will be suspended for 3 years. UMC will help the department with investigations into the Chinese firm during that period. Fujian Jinhua was founded as part of a Chinese government policy to promote domestic production of DRAM chips, but the U.S. actions have left the plan in limbo. The United States has been dealing with a historic number of hurricanes this year, and another hurricane made landfall in the south Wednesday. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori has the latest.
Hello there. Hurricane Zeta made landfall in the United States on Wednesday, making it the 11th storm to do so of the year. That's the highest number on record. Gusts of 180 kilometers per hour were reported in parts of Louisiana. To show you the aftermath and also stormy conditions, take a look at this footage. Hurricane Zeta slammed into the U.S. Gulf Coast Wednesday evening, bringing its Category 2 winds and storm surge to the Louisiana and Mississippi coastlines. This was the 5th tropical cyclone and the 3rd hurricane to hit Louisiana this year. Major flooding has been reported, along with downed trees. The governor of Louisiana has activated 1,500 National Guard troops to deal with rescue and recovery operations. Now, Zeta is expected to move over the southeastern United States and also the mid-Atlantic coast on your Thursday as the remnants of a hurricane. This system will continue to bring a risk for tornadoes and heavy rain. Another big story for the U.S. is extremely low temperatures. Frigid air is coming in from Canada, and that will push down temperatures. Chicago might see the high of only 8 on Friday and even lower than that on Sunday. Winnipeg could see -2 degrees on Sunday. Minneapolis will see a couple of days of snowy weather into Friday. The Western Pacific has been very active as well so far this month. Molave has become a low-pressure system and moving over the Indochina Peninsula. We have a newly formed storm called Koni. Koni is expected to strengthen to a very strong typhoon and hit the northern areas of the Philippines on your Sunday. And then another system will form, and that is expected to head towards the Philippines and also southern China into next week. Now, Tokyo will continue to see drier conditions, but the temperatures will be in the teens for the first time in 7 days on Friday.